Hello and welcome. My name is Rebecca Birdwell and you are now at Simply Wyldwood, and it is Wyldwood, Texas with a Y. And welcome to our homestead and our future food forest for food forest abundance and Freedom Farm Academy. So this is the parking lot, and this is typically where guests and people start at the beginning. And a lot of times I tell people, or I used to tell people, leave your problems in the car. This is now your time to step into the woods and step into the forest and just relax. And I noticed that sometimes that was really hard for people, and I found that it doesn't matter. Even if you bring it into the forest will take care of you no matter what. And so I've kind of dropped that expectation because I don't need it. So welcome to the forest. What I usually tell guests is that this is their private trail to and from the barn. Over here is our residence trail, and I often say, speaking of, if you are going to take that pathway, you may see my husband naked in the shower. So that tends to have people.
I tend to take showers in the nude. Hi, nice to meet you. Yes. How's it going? Hello.
It tends to remind people to come this way. So Dad, just to let you know, we're filming, and we are filming just from the beginning. It's all natural. It's just a side visit.
All right.
All right. So if you want to come this way, I often also tell people that this is family land. My grandparents lived here, and they bought this space in the 70s, and so I grew up here as a kid, coming here as a kid. And the little boys that I used to play with actually still live over there, and they're adult boys now. They still live across the street from my grandmother's best friend. So have deep roots in this area. We didn't get to travel much in the forest when I was a kid, but we stayed around the immediate house. So if you're looking around, we have about 4 basic trees, I would say big trees, and I count one of them, it's a bush because it gets as big as a tree. One of them is the Yopon holly, which is this plant here, and it's red berries, and it is our only native Texas caffeine source. So you can use the leaves for tea, but do not eat the berries, but we like the berries are amazing for the birds. Our second tree we have bur oaks and post oak, and I am not sure which one is which, but you can see the oaks here. And these are our native oaks, and with that type of leaf. And then as you can see, this is the hopoxylon that I was talking about.
Yeah.
And so basically, just so everybody on the camera knows, that we don't have oak wilt like Austin has oak wilt. We have what's called hopoxylon, and it lives in the soil all the time. And in my theory, and what I've heard from talking to people, is that it is in the soil, and with healthy trees, it doesn't affect healthy trees. It affects unhealthy trees. So it's been my job kind of to go through and make things as healthy as I can. So the other tree we have is they call them cedars, but I think they're pretty much junipers. But everybody calls them cedars here in Texas. So, and we're in Cedar Creek actually too, so I'm thinking maybe that's why we are named after the cedar trees. And the cedar trees are pretty resilient, and some people have kind of a love-hate with the cedar trees. They say that you should cut down all your cedar trees and everything else will grow, but they're pretty resilient, and we don't have that theory, but we knew when we lost a lot in 2011, because there was a huge drought in 2011, and we knew that when we lost a lot, we knew that it was pretty serious. So this is the opening to the space of where guests come, and we always say this is your space here, and this is our homestead space over here. So typically guests have the range of this way, and then the fire pit area, and the gardens, and it pretty much works out. I mean, I kind of like the theory of, I like keeping the experience small for people, and letting them know that they're here on site with nobody else except their hosts. And I think that's a win-win for both of us. I think it's nice for us being the host, and I think it's nice for the guests to know that they're here. And I think it's nice for people that don't experience nature a lot to know that they get a safer feeling when the hosts are here versus maybe trying to camp somewhere else. So let's see, we will go this way first. So what I've been doing, just so you know, all of the grass is purposeful. So what I did, which is hard because all of this has been a big compromise because there's two people that live here and with kind of two little bit slightly different views on what they want done. And my husband's very into grass and very into mowing. He actually loves mowing. And so the compromise had to be for me to negotiate what aspects I could actually let go wild. And so what we did is we let everything grow wild, and all of this tall grass that you see all around over here all used to be mowed all the time. So all of this and all of this used to be mowed all the time. My husband used to call this actually the great lawn. And so it was a real negotiation to get it to where he would let me grow the grass. But the cool thing is that by doing this, I was actually really able to see what paths I took every day. And so where do I need to go is where I cut my grass. And so it gave us some really definite pathways. And then if you look at what's not mowed, that's where you can see something growing. Like that's where you can see a guild, or that's where you can see something else besides grass. Or actually you can even see like, what is it that's growing? Because now I can start identifying things. And now I can figure out what ground covers I want. So that's been a super exciting project that it's been going on, just because it's just like, let it go. And I think we also compromised, which I'll show you over here, where my husband does get to mow the grass. He does get to mow the trails, of course, because I'm like, please keep the trails mowed. So people come out and camp. They either can stay in the barn or they can camp. Either way. So some people have camped right here. And then on the design, you can see where those septic circles are. And so we're walking right through the septic circles. I let the septic circles go wild, and that way I could figure out where they landed. And it actually ended up perfect because this trail in the middle is where you can walk without ever getting in the septic circles. And so I figured that the chakra trail could go here, because if I play this right here, then the water will reach this area and water the flowers along these trails. So, and this is would be a good, walkway here to go right back into the woods. So if you walk through, and like none of this was accessible when my grandmother was here. So all this part is some things that we've done along the way. So another space for campers, and another space for campers over here. And this is actually the first time that we learned about animals and reptiles, letting you know they're there without showing themselves. And now I see it all the time. Like snakes, if you're out and about and you smell something and you're not quite sure what it is, and you can't identify it, like is it it's probably an animal letting you know that you're getting a little too close. This is the original food forest from 2020, and this is before I had any formal training in permaculture. I feel like since I've had my formal training, I feel like I was doing a lot of things anyway, and a lot of things intuitively, but again, just learned so much more in the course, and mind-blowing stuff in the course, which now I want to go back and I want to fill in some of these gaps. And one of the biggest areas was the tree gilding. And I feel like I was doing some of that during my annual bed plantings anyway, because I know certain annuals bring in nitrogen, so I understood the concept. But now I want to really get in the perennials and get them established so that this can happen out here. And so as you walk through here, these are our 2 plum trees. And I always tell everybody, if you want fruit, you are 3 years too late, because at least in Texas, we don't get production in trees for 3 to 5 years. And so these are 3-year-old trees. Well, 3 years established here, and I got my first set of plums off this tree this year. So this is a Santa Rosa, and this is a Methley. And then here's my first experience down below in bringing some nitrogen in, because in Texas, in 100 degrees, these things love to grow. This is black-eyed peas, and they're actually historically significant because they fed the South during the Civil War. When the North came down and wanted to burn all the food crops, they left the black-eyed peas because they thought they were fodder for the cows. And it actually, some of the Southerners survived on their black-eyed peas. So this is the newest addition here. These guys are the bag, right now they're just called the bag flock. They're called, they're my barred rock flock, and they're babies still. They do have access to come out, but they're just hanging out inside right now. I really wanted a flock back here. I'm just in love with barred rocks, and I just really wanted a barred rock flock. And I found out that they are actually really docile, and I ended up with 3 roosters in my other flock, and one of them just happened to be barred rock. So I thought this would be perfect, because I want these guys to breed on their own. I want to experiment and see if they can do it. So that's my barred rock flock, and this is the beginning of the food forest over here. This is a sink area. We lost this shade, but we're replacing the shade. I have my roses here. These are called Belinda's Dream. They're Texas rose. They're supposed to be great in Texas. They've been very good. On our design, you guys added some mulberries, which were supposed to drop for the chickens. So, because this is a chicken food forest, one of my goals was to feed everybody here on site in the homestead, including the chickens and the pets. And so adding a mulberry and some other berry bushes and berry trees were on the design. So this was our mulberry, and we put it on this side just because you know, it just was not working. It only worked over here, but the idea was for it to grow up and over. Even though it's a dwarf mulberry, I didn't know it was so tall. It's going to get big. So it's going to, I'm anticipating it goes up and over and then drops for the birds over here, and then the humans can come over here. And that way when you're here doing your dishes or whatever, you can have some mulberries. And then roses, and then this guy that's not blooming yet right here, this is another awesome story. This is called the Peggy Martin Rose. And during the Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana, there was a woman named Peggy Martin, and she had hundreds of varieties of roses and loved roses. The hurricane came and she had to evacuate, and her house went over underwater for 2 weeks of salt water. And she came back and was very upsetting, and this was the only rose that came back. And so I call it the Katrina Rose or the Peggy Martin Rose.
I just came walking in the house.
So also this area back here was not fenced. And again, compromising. My husband's not big into fencing anything. So, but we had lost a lot of chickens due to predators. And so I said, we've got to have a fence back here if we're going to do this. And so again, thinking in permaculture and stacking functions and things having more than one purpose, I put 3 grapevines on the fence line. So if you walk this way, you'll see that this is one grape here, and then also elderberries were on the design to add another. I have an elderberry over here, so we added another baby elderberry here. And I've got a ton of mint. I always have a ton of mint back here. Some people are like, how do you have that much mint? Like, how do you not have that much mint? It just grows here. So that made me start thinking about berries and berries that drop. So I added a couple of things, like I added a Barbados cherry, I added a chili pekin, and kind of thinking about things that are dropping for the birds. This is a mullein right here, and if you can see, it's going to flower up at the top. Oh, and this is another thing that's hugely important in Texas is shade cloth. And I keep thinking, I keep saying, I've said this year after year, and we get a little bit more and a little bit more, but this whole area needs to, this area and the area we're going to move into, I think it's crucial that when you get to 100 degrees, you just go ahead and shade everything, because it's crucial for me as a human, and everything under here thrives. You can totally tell the difference. It's crispy out there, thriving under here, and it's just 50%. So what I did is I reused my cedars, the dead cedars from the forest, and planted them in the ground, and then got some shade cloth. So I think that's what I'm going to continue doing. So here's another one of the designs, implementations, which is another mulberry. And I went ahead and added a pumpkin down there, and some more black-eyed peas here. And you can see they're starting to come up right here. I'm telling you, look, that they come up in poor soil. They come up when it's dry. They just love it. It's a Texas thing. And then we've got a Turk's cap here. Again, not watering that outside very much, and look, it's still blooming. That's what I'm kind of focusing on right now, is like looking to see what's growing without much maintenance, because I don't think it's not going to be not hot. I think this is something we're gonna have to deal with. And this is like, what are the solutions now? So again, another grape, Texas grape, planted with, again, some black-eyed peas around it. We've got, these are some of the apples. This is a Fiji apple, and all this growing under here, again, is are the black-eyed peas. And I know comfrey is a big thing, and we all keep talking about comfrey. I'm experimenting with it. I have not had a lot of luck with it in Texas because it just burns up. So I'm trying to plant it in the shade and see what happens, because it's just not a lot of luck with it. This was on the design. When you guys put the beautyberry on the design, I was like, oh, we have beautyberries everywhere. These things come up naturally on their own. They love it. The birds love it, and you can eat the berries. So those do really, really well. My grandmother said that you can take the leaves and rub it on your arms, and it keeps the mosquitoes away. And you've got an elderberry there. And again, I think those are pretty good in Texas too, because this thing has froze back in our big freeze and just came right back. So, and then behind it is well, we'll go that way in a minute. So this was that volunteer pumpkin patch where the chicken coop used to be right here. And I threw the pumpkins to the chickens, and they didn't really want the pumpkins at all. And I had a huge pumpkin patch here that gave me pumpkins and shaded the shade. I really left it because I wanted to shade the ground because I knew it was coming. And also, I'm always watching at what the chickens don't eat. They didn't eat any of the little babies seedling of the pumpkin. So something to remember. These come up naturally. I didn't plant any of these sunflowers. They just come up on their own. I think it's a gift from the birds. I leave them because I use a biomass. I use this as chop and drop. From what I understand, this might be a dynamic accumulator because I think the leaves have phosphorus in them, is what I think. The seeds have for the birds. The stalks do not decompose very well, but you know, I was also leaving it for shade and thought it would be kind of fun, but then it got super overwhelming out here, and we had to come out here and clear out some of it. It was crazy. It was more than just a fun place to be. It was actually kind of scary. So if you come right through here, and they itch too if you touch them. So this is a pomegranate right here. Again, in Texas, I think that's a great one. I was not taking care of that, and it was doing fine, but then I started to. This guy, mugwort, is like a weed. So I actually have to thin this guy back. But suppose you can make a tea out of it, you can smoke it. It's good for lots of things. This fig's doing pretty good here. That's a new addition. These two guys are not 2020s, they're 2023, the two trees. The mugwort was a gift from a neighbor, so it was going crazy. And then over here is where we planted the goji berries that were in the design. And I always say, I think this is important too. These are not the months to do any planting in Texas because it's really, really, really hard. Even the ones I did in June are struggling. So this goji berry was planted before June, and these goji berries here were planted in June, and you can see they're struggling. I just keep them watered. I think they're going to live, but you can see the difference in how they're reacting to the heat stress. It's really hard. But if this was shaded, it'd be different. So if you look out here, this is an Asian pear. We're actually, one of the reasons that I feel like I do this is because we seriously love food here, and we love good food, and we love healthy food. And my husband is the cook / chef, and he makes a salad he calls it Apache house salad, and it has Asian pear in it. So I told him I was going to grow him an Asian pear. So that's my Asian pear, and this goes to show you how long these things last. So if you're looking at long-term food forest food, this guy's as old as I am. My grandfather planted that. It's full of pears. Now, I'm not going to say they're the best pears, but they do feed the wildlife, and I do put them in my shakes. So, but it just goes to show you how long-lasting it can be to have a food forest once it's established. On the other side of the chicken coop is a peach tree, again with the nitrogen source underneath. And this is another exciting thing. This is when you know you're doing something right in your food forest. So this guy, it's when you go, oh, I didn't plant that. So this guy came up just from seeds that fell last year. So this is a jalapeno, and it was funny because none of my jalapenos came up by seed this year in the house, and I was kind of upset because I had such a great crop last year. Not that you need too many jalapenos, but this one came up on its own. So that's when you know this came up on its own. My sweet potato vines came up on their own. All of this, I was kind of doing the same thing in the food forest out here as I was out there, just seeing what's going to grow out here. All of this right here is ground cherry, and so none of these I planted, but this is a little ground cherry. It's kind of cute. It's like a little lantern, and so I think it's like a ancient tomato, but you cannot eat them when they're green. They're super poisonous when they're green. So just know that. So this is the food forest, and we are just going to continue to gild the trees that we have, and we'll step on the other side so you can see the one apple that produced this year. It was kind of funny because it's the 4th year and it gave me 4 apples, and I was thinking, so if you go this way, this is a really great tree too. It's an oak. It's one of my favorites because it's a nice shady area. I say in Texas in May is when you start looking for shade, and if you can find the shade in Texas and just stay hydrated, I think you can stay outside. I mean, be careful, of course, but I don't think people should be afraid of going outside because it's 100 degrees. I think you just take precautions. So over here is our Dorset apple, and it actually gave us some fruit this year. And then on the other side over here, this is my first attempt again and really trying to do sweet potatoes. But again, it's just so hot. And if you notice chop and drop, people always ask what chop and drop is. This is my version of it, and I told you I got so much sunflowers, I just chop and drop it to cover. That was in May, so that's what I'm saying, you start looking for shade. And so you make shade for your soil. And so here's our other Dorset, Gala, and Fiji apple on the other side. So these are 3rd year, so we'll see on those. And then back here, there's our outdoor shower. And if you peek in, so you can see the woods, the forest. And I don't know if you have time to look in the forest, but we'll go to the annual beds. Because the annual beds were something I told Matthew. I said, Michael. I said, no matter where we are in the design, we got to do the annual beds in March because we got to feed ourselves. So that was my goal. Here's our tank, our 2,500 gallon tank. It seems like a lot, but it feels like it's not a lot once it's gone. And it is not, it It has a little bit of water in it, but it's basically empty right now because we haven't had rain in a long, long time. I mean, a long time. So this is where I was thinking the kitchen would go, because, well, we'll go in the barn in a minute. But we have the side windows open on the barn so you can bring nature in. So we wanted to do everything to not obstruct that view. So this is the annual bed area. This was only 2 beds in March, an 8x12 and an 8x4. And so we expanded it to what it is now, which is, I think it's about 500 square feet of growing space. So this is a kind of a learning experience here, knowing about shade. This tree, this is what I call a winter bed, because when this tree loses its leaves, this bed can be used in the winter. The other learning experiences is when you go buy soil from somebody, you better touch it before it goes in your truck and bring it home, because it might not be what you want it to be. It might be something else. So this soil is taking a long time to build here, even though it was brought in. It's completely different than any other soil. This over here is my overabundance of Palermo zucchinis. Yes. And thinking that they weren't going to get that big, I did put them in thinking they were Trombosinos, so I thought that they would go this way and make a nice shade for this struggling tree here. They ended up, none of them were Trombosinos except the one on the end, but they produced so much. So I say that this was a success. I'll be growing these again. This was mentioned in the design here, but it wasn't mentioned here in the design. But the thing is, Lindsay always says, listen to the land, and that's what we do here. This tree struggled from the many freezes that we've had. The 100-year freeze, all the drought, everything. So it was one of our very favorite trees, and it was all dying on top. And so we had to get it trimmed. And this is what was left. And my guys that I love so much that do my heavy chainsaw work for me had it all stacked up next to the tree, which was like not a good thing. So I thought, why don't we start making a hugel bed? So it saved us because we didn't have to move it very far. And it kind of honors the tree. It's like, oh, here's your part of your life is right here. And then it's always an experiment. As I always say, everything's an experiment when you're growing. So we've got tomatoes over here. Those are black crims, beans and cucumbers. More tomatoes, and then again, if you notice the shade cloth area in the back, I think that's what I'm gonna do here, because I mean, this is kind of a makeshift shade, and it doesn't really cover the whole garden, but you can tell a difference between this here and how that struggles over there. So this shades very well here. All of this stuff's about to go out of season, and this is gonna be what's in for summer. Oh, I hear that drone. I thought it was these. So if you look in here, this was a gift. The purslane came up on its own, which has like omega-3s, and I think it's the most omega-3s in the plant kingdom. Or is it omega-6? Whatever the ones the plants have, it's got the most. So okra, this is all the summer crops. Okra, watermelon, black-eyed peas. This is a new addition. This is buckwheat. Down here we've got, well, let me tell you about this first. This was also an experiment this year. This is called a lychee tomato, and I got it from my Secret Santa, the seeds from my Secret Santa. And they are cherry tomatoes, but look at all the spikes on them. See the spikes? And they're very I think this would be a great border plant if you were trying to keep out predators, because it's very hard for me to harvest. And so I think it would be a nice gift plant, gift to the animals, but then stay out of my garden. So, because it's hard. I mean, it pokes you to go in there. So we pushed it up. We have a really good crop of basil this year because I put basil everywhere. Basil. And see how I was using these to kind of shade a little bit, and then to see if things would trellis up them like they did in the back, and it didn't really work the same as I expected it to. But this side gets shade from this tree here, and so you can see how this is pretty lush. Again, all this is that nitrogen source. These are black-eyed peas. Again, they love it in Texas in the heat. This is my celery going to seed. So all of this, I'm probably gonna just shake it, see if it comes back, but I'm gonna try to save some as well. So again, if you notice on the ground, what we do is we like to reuse. So all of these are cedars from the forest, and we just put these down, and then we did bring in extra soil for this project. And we did look at it before it got here and touch it. So I'm always looking for shade, and I'm always looking for places to sit. So this actually gets shaded in the afternoon. And this is a red bud, which my grandfather planted these red buds because my mother's birthday's in March. And he said, you'll always have the red buds blooming on your birthday. And I did learn from you guys in permaculture, probably the class, I'm not sure, you guys, this is a nitrogen. It's bringing nitrogen to the earth. So surprise, my grandfather was an organic gardener, Rodell style, and so maybe he knew that. He was organic before it was, well, where it started probably. So this is the new project here too. I really love these things for trellising, and I'm only going to do my beans on this from now on because they're too short. Those are too short over there, and I want them to keep going, and they'll keep going. And so that leads us over here to the next bean that does amazing in the Texas heat. We went out of town for a little while and came back, and these guys were producing over here. So I was trying to Three Sisters, sort of worked, but these guys right here, this is called a yard-long bean or an asparagus bean. It's a family member of the, I don't know, I want to say black-eyed pea, but this is called a yard-long bean or an asparagus bean. These love it in the heat. I'm going to actually plant, I say don't plant anything in this heat. I'm going to plant more of these over that trellis because I know that they'll work in the heat. So protein source, I'm always looking for protein sources because you know we can grow a lot of vegetables, but if you aren't raising animals to eat, then we're looking for protein. Watermelon here, some chocolate sunflowers, and then these guys again too, great for Texas, I think. These have been third season legacy zinnias. So in other words, I harvest the seeds and then I replant them everywhere. And if you can get them established, they'll come up, which means get them in before it's 100 and keep them watered, and then they kind of do their own thing. They grow on their own. So asparagus bed is right there. And then here's another example of a sit spot. So when you're working out here and you're thinking about where I want to sit and where's the shade, because you're always looking for the shade. This tree was dead, but this had a live tree behind it, so we cut it off and made it into a seat so we can sit. Again, in the shade. So the corn did pretty well this year, but again, here's those yard-long beans. They're great. These are some of the trombocino squash. We'll see what they do. Now it's just so hot. And then we have where the chickens are working. I did experiment with kind of a kitchen garden area near the house over here, but I feel like the first year of any garden it's first year sleeps, second year creeps, third year leaps. So you remember that. These guys, this is one of those things that when you learn not to fight something, These guys again have been here longer than I have, and they pop up everywhere, so I decided let's just go with it. They deserve to be here because my grandmother must have planted them at some point, and they are everywhere and total opportunists. You'll see them out there just growing. They'll grow on anything. So, and they're super beautiful. You can eat them. Well, you can put them in teas. Supposedly they make fruit. I have not seen that yet, but they are going to be. I told David we're going to nurture that area next year with those things. So this is a homestead. So if people come and they go to the fire pit, you know, they know we're here. But again, like I said, we don't really, it's like, if you want to talk to me, I'll talk to you. So all of this, I think, is the new space for the new food forest. This was that area with my awesome bathtub in there that I didn't think I would like, and I fell in love with my bathtub. For 7 years, I didn't have a bathtub. And my husband was like, let's do a remodel. I'm gonna give you a bathtub. I thought it was just a luxury. This is the day that I was sitting in this bathtub and I was thinking about zones, and I was looking up and all of this, and I was thinking how blessed and how beautiful it is. And I could see all of this. And I was just like, oh, I love my space and I love my trees. And then that's when I looked out the window and I was like, this is my zone 1. Even though at that point in time, I never ever really walked over here like frequently, like you would define zone 1, but I was in that bathtub every day enjoying this space. So I thought, that's when I thought that maybe zones were also could be looked at as internally and inward, inside to out versus just outside, because I was walking around trying to define my zone 1. So that's when I also immediately went to my husband and asked him about his windows in his bike shop. And I said, that's your zone 1. So these are my working chickens. I call this chicken coop the oil rig. And I don't know if this makes sense to you guys since you're from a different state, or a different place, but in Texas, off the Gulf Coast, we have oil rigs, and people go work on oil rigs and they go for like 3 months at a time, and then they come back to their house and they're not working. I say that's what my chickens are doing. They're working in their oil, this is their oil rig because they're working right now. So when they're done working, they can go back to their stationary space. So this is electric, so just be careful. I have 15 chickens over here, and they're probably all kind of hanging out in the pool right now, but we kind of did an experiment to see how fast they could work. So I took the information that I've seen from Jeff Lawton's Chicken Caravan, and he had 30 chickens in 500 square feet, and they cleared 500 square feet in 3 weeks. So I had half as many chickens, so I didn't measure this exactly. I'm gonna assume it's 250 square feet, but they cleared all of this in the month of May. I moved them over here. This has been their June project. And the difference was here, I didn't give them the mulch at first. I let them clear the land first, then I put the mulch in, and they spread the mulch for me. So you see there's less grass. I planted these, yeah, we know what these are now, right? They are black-eyed peas, because I wanted to try to bring some nitrogen in. I also thought, I'm gonna broadcast black-eyed peas so I can really see where the sun is. And this really told me the sun is right here in the middle. And another fig tree. So, and these are my grandmother's crepe myrtles. And they were having a hard time, and my husband was always trying so hard to get them to bloom. And so I think by having the chickens over here and adding the nitrogen and just taking care of this area, we had a nice bloom this summer on these trees. So the difference over here is we tried to do the same thing. And by the way, that looked like this. So the chickens did a really good job. It looked like this, now it looks like this. So when we moved them over here, the difference that I did is I added piles of mulch at the beginning. So I don't think I'll do it again that way because they did less work on the grass. So you can see that there's still, considering they've been out here the same amount of time, they've still got a lot of grass. Oh, and this is also my microclimate right here. So I have my 2 fruit trees waiting to go in. And it's, I moved them away from the wall. In the design, they were in the wall, and this wall gives some shade. So I moved, again, doing this helped me watch where my sun is going to be and where it's not going to be. Because I think in designing, I mean, and I'm a baby designer, but I think in designing, the sun is going to be, figuring out where the sun is one of the hardest things if you're not on site. Because I'm on site and I feel like it's hard. But like I told you, my husband's an expert in the sun. So this is almost the end of the tour. This was my gift. And when I did the tour last time with that first group, we actually started here. Thought it was appropriate because we were talking about the soil. So this was a gift of mulch from some tree guys. And it took a while for me to chase them down and finally get a drop, but it was a nice big pile, and I'd been sitting on it for a long time, and I thought that it was kind of a waste of a gift to sit on it. So when I started, and I wasn't opening it up for another gift if I didn't use it. So I started to quickly move and try to get it, and it was, I was hoarding it for really no reason other than, I don't know, maybe scarcity mindset instead of abundance mindset. And then this is also an experiment in a hugel bed, just because I have never had a lot of success with regular compost. I've had a lot of success with vermicomposting, but with regular compost, it was always a lot of work for me to do and turn. And I didn't ever really get a lot of stuff out of it. So I kind of like the idea of letting it sit and just kind of going with it. And then I also, I do a lot of chop and drop. So that was kind of my solution. Not saying I don't want to try it and try to get better at it, but I just have not found a good way to do it. I have a pulp partner from the juice bar, and so twice a week I have 2 buckets of pulp that I add, and then I use this and I cover it up. Like that over there, I didn't cover it up, but typically I cover it up. So I just decided to just let this whole thing go into another hugel bed, see what happens. Because this was actually compost that I was trying to, it's just like, I feel like you gotta turn it for it to break down. But let me add one more thing. The experiment with the ground cover. So this was something I kind of was obsessing about because my husband, we'll step into the shade. My husband really wanted to be able to come out and walk barefoot. And in my world, that doesn't make sense to me. But in learning how to compromise and also thinking back and like designing for other people, like I'm not the only one that lives here, so I had to kind of compromise on that and think about other people's wants and needs. Because I mean, I'm like, look at me, I'm in boots. I know better. Stickers, fire ants. But my husband really wanted to be able to come outside barefoot. And so I started to do some research on ground covers, and a lot of people were saying clover, but then when I would do the research, it's red clover here. It's not white clover from what I understand. Red clover was a little taller than I wanted. Some people were saying creeping thyme, which would have been great to walk through that and just smell it. I wanted that, but then some of my Texas people were like, that's not gonna work. So what I did is I started to look for what's working. And we have 2 ground covers that really work here. One's called horse herb, and that's great for the shade. And the other one is called frog fruit. And after looking at what frog fruit was, I remembered it from when I was a kid. And so I think that's what we're gonna go with, or want to go with for the sunny areas. And then the other areas will be the horse herb. which I've been looking at it to see if I can transplant it. I don't see any really here, but because it grows in the shade. But I was thinking of ordering a pallet. They said I could only order a pallet, and I just wanted to experiment with a little bit of it. And so I think I'm just going to transplant it from the back. But I don't see any. Here's the other compromise. This is the space that's going to be mowed. So David said this is what I want. Now remember, he's gone from somebody mowing this entire place to just this space right here and the trails. So he wanted this to look like a park. And it was funny when I was giving the tour, the gentleman on the tour who got a sign from you guys, he was like, I agree with your husband. So I think that I've pretty much showed you everything unless you want to walk in the forest.
Or even the barn, if you want to show us the barn.
Yeah. So this tree was one of the best trees here, and it used to shade this entire deck. And it also used to have this branch that came down here, and it kind of gave us privacy from this space to this space. And like I said, the 100-year freeze, and then last year's freeze, and then the 2011 drought were not good for that tree. And it's one of the oldest. So here's the barn. And I called it a yoga barn. My husband calls it a party barn. That was the other compromise. I got a yoga barn, he got a party barn. So we teach class in here, and David does not teach how to party. He says he would, but no. I teach yoga class, yoga meditation class. If people want to stay, they have the choice of staying in the barn, or they can stay in a tent. We recently added that loft at the top, which I think is a nice addition because it feels like you are in a tree house when you're up there, because when you're up there at the top, you can see all the trees. So the vision of this place was to make it to where when you came in here, you felt like you were in nature without the bugs. And so that's why we have so many windows on the side, and then we have the two glass barn doors, garage doors on the front. So that when you're in here, you're surrounded by nature. And when you have these windows open on the sides, you get a really good cross breeze sometimes. Again, nothing helps in 100, but it's a nice cross breeze. These do not have screens on them, so they're not. I always say it's at your own risk on these for mosquitoes. But it's lovely when you're in a shavasana, and all of a sudden the wind comes rushing through. And then people get up after Shavasana and they're like, what just happened? And you're like, I don't know, but you're welcome. So it is lovely. And there's wildlife out here. And I tell people that there is wildlife, and there have been some serious wildlife out here, and that could, are not going to hurt us unless you mess with them. But we're in nature, and I always say, if there's a balance with my predators out here and my non-predators, then the non-predators stay away from my garden. So I always notice that when I'm kind of not doing my due diligence and keeping my chickens safe, and the predators start picking off my chickens as dinner, that's when the rabbits start to populate, and then the rabbits come to my garden. And so if people ask me all the time, do you have deer, do you have rabbits? And I see them all. I don't see a lot of deer, but I do see a lot of rabbits, but they tend to not bother my food. And I think that's the reason, is because we allow the nature to balance itself out in the forest. So, do you want to sit back now?
Sure. I got my boots on.
Do what?
I'll walk gently.
So I will take care of it when you leave. So there is a full bathroom in here, and it's hot and cold shower. So before we had the loft, people would just kind of set up and like set up air mattresses all along this area. We have this for teaching purposes, and we have chairs. So if people wanted to teach a class out here, groups wanted to use this as a teaching space, we kind of set it up for that. I think that's about it. Typically, people eat out here. They don't really bring food in the barn because of ants. Did you have anything to add?
Thank you so much for having me at your property. This is amazing. I'm so happy to meet you in person.
Sure.
And see how far you've come after taking your certification and really digesting the design, and like you said, and coined living your design. So I'm really thrilled to just witness everything that has happened over the past, many months that we've been working together.
Yes.
And I can't wait to see your designs.
Well, I learned a lot from you. I can hear your voice, and when things happen, listen to the land. And you do it, you listen to the land. But it's nice to have somebody to remind you to do it. I'm like looking at the camera and looking at you.
It's all good, it's all good.
I do believe the land will tell you what needs to happen. And it'll tell you if you need to slow down or not, or if that's going to be right or not for what your needs are, and also will tell you to analyze your needs and wants. So, what do you really need versus what do you really want? So typically when we do forest bathing tours, I always start here because we're usually coming out of the garden. And then also I do something I call nature nourishment. It's where we do forest bathing and then we come out, and then we usually do an activity in the garden, which is a planting activity or harvesting activity. And a lot of times when people, it's fun for them to plant because then they get to have something that they know is here and that can grow, and then they can come back to see what it's like later on. And those are the opportunities when I've had people get excited about growing their own garden. And I've told Lindsay before, because it's a teaching aspect, it's like when you're a teacher, you learn that there's 3 things in teaching. It's I do, we do, you do. And so demonstrating is when I do it, I'm teaching you how to do it, but then we do it together. So in other words, when my ladies for the annual installation came, I was demonstrating each plant. Even though in my mind, you plant the squash or the cucumber the same way that you plant the zucchini. But in a new person's mind, they need to be able to see each one of them happen. So then they got to do the we do part, and they got together, and I put them off, let them talk, let them do their own thing, and they did it on their own, so they could ask questions to each other. But then the I do, we do, you do. The you do is usually the assessment piece for teaching, and it was so great because that's also where that the information has been like solidified, and that the student or the student, that they've got it, is when someone called me afterwards and they said, I was so excited after doing that. I went home and I planted all the plants you gave me. And so in my mind, that was like confirmation that they learned what they needed to learn, and then they went and did it on their own. So again, thinking like a teacher, that's the assessment piece. So she passed. So this is the forest. Often we come in and we say at the beginning of forest bathing, you treat this as a sacred experience, and that is at the beginning. There is where you would like take a couple of deep breaths and come into a sense of gratitude and devotion for the space. And it's also, I think, a time where you think about how you look at perfection and what's perfect, because everything's perfect out here, but it may not meet your expectation of perfectionism, because you're going to see death, you're going to see life, and you're going to see everything in between, and it's all where it's exactly is supposed to be. So you will see a lot of things like this, and I tell everybody everything I do is purposeful, and so I try to keep all of my brush on site and let it break down. I call it feeding the forest. My husband kind of laughs at me because anytime I trim something, I just put it back into the forest. because I want it to decompose. It does take a very long time to decompose. So none of these trails were here when we got here. I found out that this is I was told by my future bee partner that this is a goldenrod, and she was super excited to bring her bees here in the fall because this is the fall plant that the bees love. So also learning about succession has been fun for me, because intuitively what I felt is that it was so crowded in this forest and it was so overgrown with yaupon that there wasn't a lot of air circulation, and so things were cramped and unhealthy. And so the more time that I've been able to spend out here just getting the dead stuff out, the more things I see that start to happen. And like I had a whole patch of bee balm this year that wasn't here ever before, and I don't think it would have been here if I wouldn't have been clearing things out. So like you'll see some open areas over there. I don't get big equipment back here, but I come back with a chainsaw and loppers, and on the other side over there is they've all gone to seed, but it was a whole patch of bee balm that had never been there before, and it made me think of the succession of the forest. We had a lot of flowers that were. So if you see this right here, Lindsay, this is another example of that. See how it looks like it's burned?
Mm-hmm.
So when I first started coming out here, I would see that, and I thought that there was a forest fire that had gone through here that I didn't know about.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what happens to it. But like I said earlier, I try to think about it. It's a process, I think, that the forest is going through. I guess, you know, you kind of also look at like there's absolutely no way I could. Well, I mean, I could treat it an alternatively way, but arborists that told us how we would need to be treating these things, there was absolutely no way to be able to do it. So this is where you can see we're moving up to high point on the property, and then this is some of my. This is where you can see this rushes in a rainstorm. This rushes down. All of this goes rushing down that way. That area over there, you can tell it's called the north side, and there's way more mosquitoes over there than there are anywhere else, and we've connected because we think there's some water pooling over there. And there was 3 trees, and we haven't come across, or I just missed the 4th tree, which is the black walnut. So here's another thing that we're doing with our sit spots. We reuse everything, so if we lose a tree, my tree helpers know now that I like them all cut this size because they know I like to use them as seats. So what I do is not everybody that comes out likes to sit on the ground, so I'm trying to put those in spaces around so that they can have a place to sit. This is my zone 1 walk every day too, by the way. My dog and I take this walk. And I feel so lucky every time I'm out here. And typically when we're doing a forest bathing, we're trying not to talk. And that's what we do, because the forest is not going to come visit you if you're out here being the dominant one. And so I always say it's kind of like meditating for me. I have to be in a phase of my meditation for 10 minutes before I'm actually really meditating. And I feel like the forest is similar. I feel like you need to be sitting in silence before you can connect. And it seems like it's about 10 minutes before everything starts to come. So typically this is where I tell guests to stop because we don't have any borders on these sides, and so I jokingly tell them, seriously tell them that they don't want to get on someone else's property in Texas. So that guests don't typically come this way, but this is the way that my dog and I come. And this is an interesting area because this is the area that I don't have control over. So because it's the power lines, it's called the easement, and the state or the city, whoever's in charge of it, they get to have access to this, and they get to just plow everything down. So I've learned when I've come out here to not fall in love with anything because it might not be here later. But it's been an interesting kind of nature lesson in seeing what grows, and seeing that nature will always come back, because these are all oaks, black walnuts, beauty berries, and then on the other side there's a big surprise that before I started coming out here, didn't even know it was here. We have our friendly buzzards that like to hang out right up here. Nature's trash collectors. Our property ends right on the other side of the easement there. But this is sometimes full of lots of flowers. Another black walnut. So it's interesting to see how fast they grow back too. I'm not sure what that is, but it kind of looks like a live oak. We do have one live oak on site, which I don't know if I think a bird must have planted it.
Hmm?
So this was always like this mystery to me. I'd come out here with a dog and I'd want to go out there, but it looked very scary. But so I didn't. But in heavy rain, this fills. Because see, you got slope here and you got slope from here, which made me come over here and get curious. So every place here is like not some place that I can always go. But this last year, and I guess every other year for the dewberries, this was full of dewberries. But this year, it was bee balm. So I guess they're going to flip and take turns. So you can see all the bee balm is already headed into right here. It's already gone to seed. So this is the area that is, the coyotes come here. And so this is where they have their coyote parties. And so when they make a kill, they come back here and they celebrate, and you can hear them partying. And so I would often come back here and see things like this. So I guess they sit right here and eat while they're looking out. So like, they know things maybe not come back from the back, but it might come from the front. So this is these are kind of newer trails because this area probably has not been frequented in a long time before we got here, but these are all really skinny, tall yopons, and they're kind of a love-hate here in Texas because they're super flammable. But again, you know, they have the tea aspect, they have the wildlife aspect. They're doing right now, they have a lot of biomass forming here, but and super durable, but also super flammable. But my opinion is that unmanaged, they are super flammable and maybe a problem. But you know, we're learning to love them. But I'm not sure about the whole succession thing with the yopons. Like, I'm not sure if I just left it alone, if something would take over and displace the yopons. because the yopons are hiding a lot of other things. And so I haven't figured that one out yet in my mind about my succession, learn my education in the theory of succession. But then again, maybe it has something to do with how people come in and clear the land, and then it, it doesn't. I don't know. Maybe you have answers to that, Lindsay. Oh, this is it too. So this is what I was telling you. What I'm doing is I'm trying to just see where stuff was starting because of the runoff. That's a high point. This is all really super low. This is runoff. So when it rains really hard, it goes this way. And what I'm observing is the stuff that's already making a berm. And so what I'm trying to do is just add on to it, because I can't get I can't get big equipment back here, so I wouldn't know how to do that. So I'm just trying to do what I can, and like just add the dead material and make berms as we go. Let's see, you can see how it's naturally doing it. Now, all of this isn't natural, of course, but when I saw it, I would start adding to it. I mean, we just want to keep it up here on our property. I do believe that there would be a stream of some sort down there at the bottom. Maybe at some point. So again, right here, all of this was bundling here, so I just kept adding. See, this is a huge slope. I think that's the highest point of the property right around this corner. And you can feel it.
Getting the overheating threatened again.
Okay. Well, we're heading back. This is the heading back part too, so like up there, I think is the highest point. Here's the other bush. This looks similar to a yopon, but it's a farkleberry, and you can actually eat these berries. But double check that. Don't go by with what I said. Always have a second source. Cicada, I think.
Yeah.
And that's what we're hearing too. So this is kind of what I do when I have things that, again, when things die, I just line them up as kind of borders. And I want to say this is probably, so this connects to this trail. We haven't not gone down this trail yet, but this is like a loop trail that goes all the way around. And this is what I would call probably the easiest trail. Like my mother's 74, she liked this trail. She was scared of that trail back there. So if I do like kind of short trails, kind of general trails, and like a general introduction to the forest, I typically take this trail because I've got the border, and again, we've taken every time we cut a tree down, we use it on the border of the trails. We use it somewhere. There is a space, I know we're running out of time, but there's a space in there that has a nice little circle of teenage oaks, and it's a nice place to go sit, and you're surrounded by the oak trees. I did have my camp back there too. I showed her the camping, I showed her the spot as a place to come visit, like as in a sit spot for forest bathing on her own, and she was, can I spend the night there? And I was like, sure. Another sit spot here, which is nice to look this way. So the trail from the parking lot to the barn, that was the first trail that we did. And I knew that it was a success when I had students that would come to yoga class and they would have to walk from that trail to the barn. And somebody told me at that point that she didn't realize how much she didn't get outside and how lovely it was. And she just walked from that trail to the barn. And I was like, I'm glad that I could give that to her, and I'm glad that I can give that to everybody that comes out, because I think it's really important to get out in nature and get quiet. Silence is really important, I think, in anything you're going to try to figure out in your life, because I think a lot of times we don't give ourselves that. And I don't believe that if you don't give yourself any silence, you're not going to hear what you need to hear, and you're not going to be able to figure out what you need to figure out. And not everybody is ready to meditate, but a lot of times if they don't want to meditate with me, I can get them out in the forest. And I feel like it's very similar. Similar, not the same. Similar. I think being in the forest is more mindfulness, but it's like a really good place to start for some people that are not comfortable meditating or don't want to meditate. And you do hear the noises of nearby happenings and neighbors sometimes, and humans are part of nature too. So this takes you all the way back to the beginning. And there's the parking lot, and there's the trail to the barn. Back to the beginning.
That's awesome. That's cool that it spits you out over here.
Yeah. Yeah. And each trail's been like, we start with one, and it's interesting because David he's really good. He does kind of the rough work of like going in and making the trail, but he's also, I say he does the rough work, but he's also very conscious of like, where is the path of least resistance? So he's gonna go the easiest way, which is probably the way the animals went or go, which is gonna be the least destructive, because he's even more against chopping down trees than I am. It's funny, he's the grass mower, but he's like really, really into like not cutting down any trees. So then again, here you go, he spits us back out here. And October is beautiful here because it's cooler. March and October in Texas are the time to be here. So
Awesome.
thank you for coming, Lindsay. I'm so glad that you got to come step foot on site. It's it's such an honor to have your feet here and see your feet instead of in the Zoom camera.
Oh, thank you.
Seeing your face.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and to finally meet
And
you.
hi to everybody that's watching. Thank you for coming and checking out this space. You're always welcome.
Thank you. Bye.